Genesis chapter 50. 50 chapters in this wonderful book, and we hit on the first 3 verses a little bit last week, but I want us to go back and revisit them just a little bit. Genesis chapter 50 and verse 1 says, "And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned him 70 days. And when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake into the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die. In my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan, there shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. And Pharaoh said, Go up, and bury thy father, according as he made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph and his brethren, and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And there went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it were a very great company. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan, and there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation. And he made a mourning for his father 7 days. And when the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites saw the mourning of the floor of Atad, they said, There is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. And his sons did according as he had commanded him. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan, and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession, for a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. And Joseph returned into Egypt, he and his brethren, and all that went up with him to bury his father, after he had buried his father." Our Heavenly Father, Lord, again, we thank you for your word. Lord, we thank you for all that you've done, Lord, how speaking to us through your precious word. And again, Lord, we just want to thank you and praise you for that. And Lord, again, we ask one more time that you'll help us here tonight. Lord, you'll expound the scriptures to us, and as always, you'll give us what we need for the days to come. And Lord, we'll be careful to give you all the glory and all the praise and all the honor. For it's in Jesus' name we ask these things for his sake. Amen. If you look at the death of Jacob, and we see, and we'll get to this here in a couple of weeks. But in verse 26, it says, talking about Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Well, there's 3 steps we can see leading up to this burial. But in chapter 50 of Genesis, we can actually see 3 coffins, and we'll get that. I just want you to be thinking about that the next few weeks, But as we look at that, we see 3 steps leading up to his burial. First, we see the preparation. Now, we read in verses 1 through 3, where Joseph called the physicians to embalm his father. Here we saw the rituals and the concern for the dead carried out in Egypt. There was a mourning throughout all of Egypt for Jacob. So, and I was thinking about, you've probably heard it said before that you can kind of judge a man's character after he's gone by how many was there at his funeral. And they've been, and it's sad. I've seen some there wasn't but a handful. And I've seen some that there was people standing in the aisles and outside the doors and looking in the windows and all that. But there we see this, and he's talking about, we see the respect that Egypt had for Jacob because they had respect for Joseph. So see how that went on there. But so we see the first step, as a preparation. There, talking about the burial of Jacob. The body had to be prepared. He had to, we went over that last week, that the Egyptians, they were specialists in burying people. I mean, mummy, and I'm going to get ahead of myself. If you went to that cave, you went to that sepulcher where Abraham and all them you're going to find bones. I believe you're going to find a mummy there where old Jacob said. I believe they done that good. They still a mummy there. Have I read anywhere? No, I don't know, but I'm just thinking. But there we see the first step, was a preparation, talking about leading to the burial of Jacob. And then verses 4 through 6, we look there and we see, so that when the days of his mourning were past, Jacob spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying. Talking about his father made him swear. He said, made me swear, saying, Lo, I die. In my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan, there shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. Pharaoh, he honored that. He said, and he said, go up and bury thy father according as he had made thee swear. So see, Pharaoh, he understood a little bit about being a man of your word, the promises that you kept. But there we look at this second part of it, we see the permission. He's asked permission. Joseph, he talked about to the people, he said, now that I have found grace in your eyes. When they looked on him, the grace was on him. I believe a man named Noah. We read about that over in Genesis 6:8, where Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Here we see Joseph. He was walking. He was an upright person. I mean, you couldn't say anything bad about him. He had the respect of the Egyptians. But even he went to them as humble. Look at the humility in that. I mean, he didn't say, I saved y'all from starving death. I'm going to go bury my dad. I don't care what you say. The humility. Remember, Joseph is being a type of who? He's a type of Christ. Look at the humility there. And then we see, all of Egypt, they knew Joseph and respected him. They all watched his every move. But here we see that. Not only we see the humility, but we see, being the diplomat he was almost right for him to ask first rather than, you've heard that saying, sometimes it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. This day and time, I'd a whole lot rather have permission instead of, I don't want to have to do that, ask for forgiveness. But there it is, we see that he was diplomatic about it, but he was humble about it. Now you got to think about, all this study we've seen, you look at where Joseph been sitting all this time. He hadn't been just one of the regulars down here in the corner in the shadows right there. He's been right front and center doing what God has showed him to do. God has allowed him to be up there. I mean, he's second in command of all of Egypt. And we come to this, and even with all that, it didn't go to his head. Now, have you seen people before that, they get doing good and they get a bunch of pat on the back, their head gets swelling. The hat size just went up from 7 to 7.5, whatever. I don't know. But what I'm getting at, we see here that Joseph, that did not go. He still kept the humility that God blessed him with. I mean, he stayed, he is Christ-like. We see it all the way through. We've seen, ever since we've seen Joseph, and we come to the end of Genesis there, we have seen the humility of God's man. So he asked him, he said, now that I found grace in your eyes. Look at this next part. He said, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying. You would think that somebody that had his stature, that somebody was up here, he just went up there and said, hey Pharaoh, I got a favor to ask for you. You see the respect here? But then you got to look at it too, think about it. He'd been mourning for a while. And when the Hebrews, when they mourned, I mean, they had their sackcloth on. Where is it? I can't remember now. Esther 4, I can't remember what verse it is. And talking about they wouldn't go to the king because of being in sackcloth, being clean. But we look here and we see, but it says after the mourning was over. But can you imagine when you've mourned that long, it's going to take a day or two to get your composure back. And if you walked in with your head up and your complexion's good and all that, and then all of a sudden you walk in and you've been crying for no telling how long and you've been weeping and all that, they're going to think something's wrong with you. So we look at that as, when instead of him just going on to Pharaoh himself, he said, He took the princes and all of Egypt and he said, would you speak in the ears of Pharaoh? He had that much respect for Pharaoh that he wasn't just going to barge in. Because where we see that he asked permission. So we've seen the preparation of Jacob, and now we've seen the permission that was asked, pointing toward the burial of Israel. But we look and we see that, speak to the ears of Pharaoh, saying, there was protocol to approach the Pharaoh, even for Joseph. Even though the morning was past, Joseph would have the effects, of that in his appearance. But the testimony of Joseph was enough for Pharaoh to grant the leave of absence to carry Jacob to Canaan. And we take and you've heard people talk about, well, if so and so said it's okay, that's good enough for me. Well, that's the testimony that Joseph had here. What kind of testimony do we have to, there's going to be certain times in the world that you're going to, if you stand your ground and you're not going to sway, you're not going to compromise or anything like that, there's still going to be part of the world that's going to respect you for what you do and where you stand for Christ is. We need to do that. Respect is earned, I understand that. But we don't demand it. Joseph didn't either. He earned it. But there it is. When we step out in the world out there, we'll stand our ground. There's going to be some of them they're going to laugh at us, they're going to mock us, it don't matter what. That's on them. That's between them and the Lord. But there's going to be some of them out there that, you know what? I got respect for them. Of all that I've done, I've never been half as good as what they are. But of all that I've known them all this time, they might say, well, I remember how they used to be, but look where they're at now. Look how happy they are. They're not swaying. But the testimony of Joseph was good enough for Pharaoh. He said, if that's what, and they took it word by word, He said, go bury your father like you promised him. We see the preparation, and then we see the permission. And then next, we see the possession there. If you look starting in verse 7, and Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And all the house of Joseph and his brethren and his father's house, only their little ones and their flocks and their herds they left in the land of Goshen. And we go on down and it talks about where they went and all that. But if you look at that, some people say, well, maybe Joseph had a good testimony, but Pharaoh didn't entirely trust him. So he got a little leverage. He kept back all. He said, they'll come back for their young'uns. They'll come back for the herds. That's their livelihood. They're shepherds. That's their livelihood. What if sometimes, if you ever noticed at a funeral, families will bring their kids and stuff like that in. But if you'll watch, most of the time, most of their little ones they don't bring in. And not all the time. Now some of them do. And if that's part of the family, they should be there. But maybe we look there and we see that, they stayed back in Goshen. You know why? Because he knew they were protected there. And I'm going to get ahead of myself. Can you imagine? You know how far it was from Egypt to Hebron? It's 250 miles. They're not on a sightseeing tour here. What would it have done to the herds? What would they have had? How many would have fallen by the wayside on the way? I believe that he left them there in Goshen to protect them there. He's going to keep his promise that he made to his people. He left them there because they were. If you look through the whole study of ever since they went down and they set aside a place in Goshen for them, they never had any trouble. Go on into Exodus. Go on in where you see all the plagues and everything. When they were in Goshen, hey, that didn't bother them. They were protected there. So I think that there we see that there was a sense of protection. Joseph could go honor his father and not have to worry about the kids and the flocks and all that. Because that's you've got to protect your livelihood. Well, if you lose all your young'uns, who's going to carry on the next? If you lose all your flock, where are you going to live off of? See, God don't do anything just to say, well, that's just the way it happened. I think all this was divinely instructed by him to protect the future of Israel. Because these ones going on the funeral, they're going to pass on. Somebody's got to take their place. There was a remnant in Goshen to carry on because God said He preserved His seed. And that right here is part of that preservation. So we look there, but nowhere else in Scripture do we have a full description of a funeral. Jacob's funeral was if he was the commander-in-chief of Egypt's army instead of a nomadic shepherd. Anyone who was a key representative of Pharaoh's court were in the funeral procession. They wasn't just a bunch of, well, I need to send about 200 people. Y'all just pick you out a bunch up there. You know what? This is one of those, you went whether you wanted to or not. But they had so much respect for Joseph, in turn so much respect for Jacob, they said, I'm going with him. You know what they're saying? Right here is a good picture of the world. I just thought about this. God, the Holy Spirit, can come in and take over our lives, and we'll let them. And how people can see how they'll be influenced. And you know what they'll say? I'm going with God. We've seen part of the world right here say, I'm going with God. You say, well, they went in a funeral procession. Who orchestrated all that? God did. They got to see a Christian funeral instead of the Egyptians. They were pagan. I mean, they had a god for everything. I mean, Ra, the sun god, I mean, that was their go-to, you know. But I mean, they had all kind of them there. But right here, they went with God, and they got to see a Christian funeral right there. So we look and we see that we can imagine there was a supply of wagons, supply of servants, and a sufficient cavalry to discourage any attacks. See, they're out in the wilderness. Now there's still a lot of nomads today that they see something that they can make $1 off of. It doesn't matter. It's like it just anywhere you go. We went to Honduras, and I got out one day, and I left, and I went way up in the village. And I mean, I was up there, and it just looked like a dark place. And some of them was saying, you probably don't want to venture too far out of this right here, because we don't know what's going to happen to you if you go on out there. But right here, see, I think it's nothing. God, He worked it out where He sent all these people and nobody in their right mind would have attacked them for nothing. But there we see the supply of everything they had. But think about this. The funeral route probably would have followed the line of the Red Sea, out across the Sinai Peninsula, reaching the southern bank of the Dead Sea. There it would follow the eastern shore of the Dead Sea, and then up the Jordan River to the threshing floor of Atad, a journey of 250 miles. That Atad means bramble, or means thorn, a thorny place. But if you think about, anytime you see threshing floor in the Bible, all but one time. Who was it? Was it Gideon was threshing in the wine press? The wine press is going to be down at the bottom of the hill. But when you're threshing wheat, it's going to be at the top of the hill. You want to catch the wind. Whenever you've treaded it and all that, you've broke the husk loose, and they throw it up in the air, the wind carries the husk and stuff off, and then the grain falls down because it's heavier. Well, they were up on this threshing floor. It may have meant thorny and brambles and stuff, but yet they was on top of the hill. God wanted the Canaanites, He wanted all them people around there to see what He was doing. So there it is. They stopped up there. I mean, they spent some time there. So we see that there at the threshing floor of Atad, they were up on a hill, so there that they'd be seen. You look in verse 11, it said, when the inhabitants of the land of the Canaanites saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, there is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of it was called Abel-Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. So we sit there, a grievous mourning. That means great mourning, a heavy mourning, that everyone around saw their grief. They saw something different about them. They saw that they were mourning something. You know what? If you ever, you don't have to raise your hand. But have you ever been going somewhere and you seen a big crowd or seen something like that? Your curiosity just got the best of you. You just had to go see what was going on. Yep, I've done it. What about that? What about that? Should we not make a stir like that? We should make such a stir as God's people that the world's going to come up there. They're going to be curious. They're going to come and say, what's going on? I want to see what's going on. It may just be that they'll get in there and all of a sudden the Holy Ghost conviction will fall on them and they'll just fall in there and you know what? They'll walk out with us. Amen. You don't know, but we've got to make a stir. Right here, they made a stir where they said they saw a grievous mourning. They knew something was up. And then they got thinking too, they knew they were Egyptians. Well, they're 250 miles from home. So what are y'all doing out this far? You know what that tells us? You know what we ought to do? We ought not be afraid to step out a little bit farther. I think sometimes we stay too close to home. We say, well, I've been right here. I don't need to, James, I don't need to leave Grays Ridge. I'm just going to stay right there. And, you know, sometimes we need to venture on out. How is a people going to know unless they hear the Word of God? How are they going to get their attention unless there's a big stir going? You know what revival's been about? About us getting that stir in our heart. And to take that stir out to the threshing floor somewhere, to get up on the hill where people can see, where they'll gather. And they say, well, do I have to be mourning? No, you don't have to be mourning. But you've got to be doing something different than what you normally do. These Egyptians are not just going to up and leave and travel 250 miles and go somewhere and say, all right, let's have a funeral here. They're not going to do it. They had a purpose to go in there. But yet, the Canaanites, all that people, the inhabitants of that country, they seen something different. And you know, we said that, you know, we're in the world. We don't have to be a part of the world. But I'm telling you, God is using the world right here for His glory. God can do that. Now, when we try to do it, we're going to mess up. We'll be a witness to the world. But there it is, that grievous mourning, you know, was that everyone saw and knew the grief. But that Abel Mizraim, that means the meadow of the Egyptians is what they named it because of all these Egyptians there. Now, if you go over there today in that Jordan River Valley, it's green just on the banks, you know, right there. But that thing feeds the Dead Sea. But when you go up there, can you imagine how lush? I mean, when we was over there, they pulled so much water out of the Jordan to irrigate with, and now there's green fields where they didn't used to be. But I believe at that time right there, you take the Nile Delta there in Egypt, one of the most fertile, lush plains anywhere in the world. Here the Egyptians, they were in this, and they called it the meadow of the Egyptians. One, because all of them were there, but then again, that just tells you what that place would have been like right there. They wouldn't have said, if it hadn't have been a lush meadow, it'd have been like a plain or something like that. And you say, well, you trying to change God? No, I'm not trying to change it. I'm trying to reason in my heart, you know, what God's trying to tell us. See, everything in here is for a purpose. You say, well, I don't know what that word means, and that don't mean nothing to me. I'm going to go on. We need to take, that's why we've took so long in this book of Genesis, and we've took every verse. We've took line by line and precept against precept to where we can get an understanding for it. Right here we see that God is using these Egyptians. They even named a place after them in Canaan. You say, well, you're leaning pretty close to those Egyptians right now. I'm just doing what God showed me right here. So. But there we see that there must have been a great wonder of why the Egyptians were so far from home honoring one of their own. They wasn't. They was there. When the Egyptian funeral came by, everyone knew it. The Egyptians, even though they were going with the family of Jacob and the Hebrews and all that, they still had their rituals. You knew whenever they come by. I wrote it down. This is one of them that they'll do in a funeral. So they rent their clothes, they smoked their breast, they threw dust and mud on their heads, and they would call the deceased by name and chanting the funeral dirge or song to the sound of tambourine. They did that on every funeral. You know what? They carried that same thing from Egypt right here. They got their attention. But if we look, verse 12, and his sons did unto him according as he commanded him. Verse 13, I want you to pay attention to this. For his sons carried him into the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, which Abraham bought with the field for a possession of a burying place of Ephron the Hittite before Mamre. We see there, the Egyptians just went so far. They went to this threshing floor, and but then it says, and his sons carried him. Standard pallbearers is 6 men. We see 12 here. They 12 of them, they all had a piece in carrying their father. They wasn't going to let the world take them. They wasn't going to let Egypt take them. Even though as low as they've been to them, they said, we've got it from here. This is on us now. Why do you think Jesus said, let the dead bury? But what he's talking about is, this is your family, this is your responsibility. But Joseph said, we'll take him. But they didn't have 6 pallbearers. You think, well, maybe, I believe all 12 of them had a hand in carrying their father to the place of his fathers. And then we look and we see that the ceremonies of Joseph, was over. Joseph and brethren carried Jacob's mummy over the Jordan to the cave of Machpelah for their father's witches. How easy would it have been to say, well, if we just had our young'uns and our flock here, we'd just stay. He turned right around. He said, I'm going back. Joseph is doing exactly what he said he'd do. God has honored this all the way through his journey. He's still honoring this right there. So they've got to go another 250 miles back to Egypt. But you know what? Think about this. I just thought about this, James. They got something to go back to. They've got the promise of God, but they know that back in Goshen, all them young'uns are. Their babies and their grandbabies and their great-grandbabies and all their flocks. And everything was there because they knew when they left that God was going to protect them there just as much as he did when all of Israel was there in Goshen. So there we've seen preparation, and then we've seen the permission, and then we've seen a possession there. You think about this. There's never been, I don't think there's ever been a funeral as great as what this is. I always wondered how many miles was covered by people in that. All of Egypt. I mean, there wasn't but 12. I mean, there wasn't but a handful of Israel, but all of Egypt was with them. I think you see the dust 20 miles off from them coming through there. But there it is, we see it. What about today? Now, you'll see some of these diplomats, that they'll have them, what they call it, laying in state for so long you can come and view the body and stuff like that. But I don't think there's ever been a funeral like the one that we see here of Israel, because God orchestrated all this. So I've looked more studying on, and the son. There was 12 of them carried him over there. And right now to this day, there's going to be, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I'm wanting to awful bad, but I'm going to wait till our next time. But think about, God don't do anything unless he's going to get the glory out of it. He's got the glory out of this. If nothing else, the obedience of the sons to their father. Let us stand up. Anybody got a word? All right. Man, you just dismiss us, please.
Father, we thank you, Lord, for the blessings of being here tonight, God. And we thank you for the word, Lord. And Father, we thank you for Brother Allen as he's studied and bring this out, Lord. It's been a blessing, God, to just study your word and see what your people's done through the years, God. Father, now we ask you to help us now, Lord, to carry the torch, Lord, while it's in our hands, God. And help light up this dying world, Lord. Father, we thank you now. We ask you to go with us, give us traveling grace, bring us back the next appointed time. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
Amen.